Hello, and welcome to my weekly stream about the Uno platform. My name is Jérôme Labat. I'm the CTO of the Uno platform open source project, all about C# and XAML running in browsers, Linux, iOS, Android, Catalyst, and many others. I spent a bit of time, about an hour, taking a look at issues and current work that we're doing inside of the Uno platform, trying to introduce the new features or discuss with people that are on the stream about different issues or questions that may arise during that time. This week, I'm going to be taking a look at an issue that was raised by the very important XAML llama that was looking at some issues at porting some code over to Uno Platform and WinUI, and got some issues with regards to nullable nullable records bindings using xBind. So that's a very specific feature, and we're going to be taking a look at what happened. So first things first, we're going to be making a repro out of this, and then take a look at if we can reproduce properly, and then take a look at how we can fix it if there's an easy fix for this. So if you're just joining, thank you for joining and welcome. So let's do a small repro now for from this thing. So using Visual Studio 2022 latest preview, which actually works quite well. That's been pretty good with the latest updates that we've done in Uno from the past week. So previously there were an issue with when you were trying to build, there was a binary something payload that was popping up from the C# compiler. We got told that it's a very bad thing to do. It's something that was there for no good reason. So now it's removed. So if you update to the latest Uno, you're not going to get that issue. So let's create a Xamarin version of the app. So we're going to call that records, nullable records, and yeah, xBind. Nullable records xBind. And let's see if we can reproduce all this. So this is an issue that was actually reported by MakerNet. He probably had something that's very similar. Actually got a crash in the runtime for some probably unrelated reason, but let's take a look and see if we can get the same thing happening. So let's do this in main page. Yeah, Darren, that's correct. And yeah, the installing side by side is quite important. Being able to have two previews at the same time is quite useful. Not having to be stepping on toes. There are things that may not work. Some of the components that Visual Studio install may not be cross versions. They're using shared components sometimes, but that's not always the case. So most of the time it works pretty well. So if you want to take a look at doing that kind of a cross, multiple installation of the same. Nope, not that one. I thought I copied it. So if you want to take a look at that feature, you can take a look at the stream from last week. I explained how to install multiple versions of Visual Studio on your machine, so that you can avoid having issues with multiple releases of Visual Studio, and if you upgrade, it doesn't work, and then you're stuck because it doesn't work. So you can have two versions at the same time, or more if you have more space for that. Okay, so it says record struct is not supported here. It's probably because my here I'm using .NET 5, so let's move this to .NET 6. It should stop whining. There we go. Probably just a bit of Nuget package being restoring, trying to take some time to restore. Let's build it once. It'll do the restore. Okay, so still not happy. My user control doesn't exist, of course. So let's put it on main page instead. So all the squigglies went away because we built the NuGet package got updated properly. got data ready here, which is a property change callback. Probably not that useful, but let's create it for now. Let's see. Generate method. There we go. Okay. So there's that, and actually let's do it on WPF for now. It's going to be easier to debug. So I'm going to be updating this one to be net6, and this one as well. Oh, it's probably already net6, is it? And the core app. Okay, so it's going to be bumping this one as well. Okay, so does it build properly? Must be set to Windows. Ah, okay, so that's the reason for this. So this template. So let's take the .NET 6 template. It's going to be easier because we're using features that are coming from C#10. So let's use the multi-platform .NET 6 for this one. So it's Nullable Records. xBind. Missed the D, but that not a big deal. Okay, so in the targets, this one, I should be having net 6 as a target. There you go, net 6 Windows and net standard 2. So I'm gonna have to bump that one as well. So this one should be building fine. Target platform is set to Windows again. So let's do it with Windows as well. Or we can do, if that doesn't work, we can just bump the version to be C#6. Okay, so this time, let's do rebuild again. Probably the restore didn't work. Okay, so this time it says initialize component and no accessible. So that's probably something else again. Okay, so we're just going to be bumping this to be net standard 2, but we're going to be bumping the version. So lang version, and we're going to be putting 10.0 for now. It's probably an additional error of Visual Studio Preview 5, so we're going to have to take a look at that one. Okay, so this one builds. So let's take again the code that's coming from here. So we got my user control, that's supposed to be main page. I'm going to be creating the method data ready. And this time it says data ready. There you go. Okay, so is it building properly? It should be. No, it does not. Is external init is not defined. Okay, so that one is interesting because I'm not using net 6 for that target, so that's one that we can change. So I'm going to be adjusting this one, and that's one of the things that we're adding manually in Visual Studio. So if you have in Uno in some of the targets that we need, so I'm going to be adding that one. So it doesn't happen if we're building for net 6, but since I'm building manually for this one, I have to add this is external init. There are assemblies that do exist that do that automatically, but I'm not going to do this for now. Okay, so let's add this here. It's external init. There we go. That should be enough. So it's probably going to fail for the others, but that's fine for now. Okay, so if I build this, does it work properly? It should be. Okay, it works properly. So now it builds properly. So this time we're going to be doing the binding. So in Debug, it says do an xBind on my property value, other property, and it's supposed to be failing. So let's take a look at what that does. So instead of the text being hello world, I'm going to be saying this instead. So we're going to be binding to my property being this one, value being the value property of nullable of t because my record is null, and other property being the field declared here as a member of the record. So let's build this and see what happens. Okay, so it builds, which is good. Now, does it work? So let's run, see what happens. So there shouldn't be anything displaying because I didn't set anything in that target. So it's loading the symbol, so that's why it's taking a bit of time. Probably should have been disabling this. Okay, so it's empty, so that's good. So it's still, it shows nothing. It's good. So that means there's no build error, which is good. There's no runtime error. So at this point, at least. So now let's add a button that will change the value there and let's change the value completely. So let's do a button, do something, and then this on click. And in my C# file, I'm going to be changing that property to something else. So we're using an xBind method without parameters, so that's easier to write. And we're going to be creating a record that we set to property here. So my property equals new my record with the date. Now the string. Okay. Let's do this again and see if we get the update now. So if we do get the update, that means that the bindings are working properly. So it could be that it's something that is coming from a previous version of Uno, because I'm using the latest preview. It could be something that we fixed in between. Okay, so we have do something here, the button do something. If I click here, nothing is happening, and it says the value property getter does not exist on type main page my record. Okay, so that makes some sense. But there's something else that's not happening here, and there's a good reason for this. And it's the fact that I created the binding is here, so it's working properly. So the mode is correct, and the value is propagated properly. But we're getting this error message that says that the getter for that property doesn't exist. Okay, so it could mean multiple things, but one of the things that could be of interest is determine why we're getting at that location. If we're getting to the binding property helper, that means that we're not getting into generated code that goes in that kind of getting the record here. And I wonder if it's not related to the fact that the record's inside a class. So let's move it out and see if we have the same issue. Okay, that's interesting. What was that? Oh no, that's better. So I don't know why there's all that loading that's happening. I think I did something with the debugger that loads all the symbols, and that shouldn't be doing this. Symbols. That's correct. It's trying to get the symbol that don't exist. Okay, so I'm going to be removing this. That's why it takes a while to load everything up, because it's trying to find symbols at locations that don't exist. So let's try it again. Yeah, still taking a bit of time. I wonder if it's related to some other feature. So I have some symbols, load all modules. Okay, so marginal unless excluded. Yeah, there's that. There's also, so the .NET framework source stepping is disabled. There's no source server. And I wonder if it's source link, maybe. Okay. So let's do it again. Let's see if do something does something. It doesn't. Okay, so the value property getter does not exist. So it means that we're not understanding that the property has a nullable type, and it's not correct. So let's go dig into all this and see how we can debug this. So one of the things that we can do is use the support for the new support for the debugger source link, which has been added by the debugger team in Visual Studio. And if I remember correctly, there's a new node that's supposed to appear somewhere in there. I don't know if they kept it or not. Okay, so let's see. There was supposed to be an external something, external sources. It's at the top. So you got external sources here. And we're supposed to be finding Uno UI. Haha. So that's a one good thing, because yeah, thanks Pedro. I took a look at your your message after. Should have looked before. So yeah, so that's at the top. So we can go take a look at all the sources that were loaded by the debugger. And I wonder if it's this that makes the Visual Studio take some time to start up. But anyways, so the message that we're trying to find is this one. So let's go to Uno and try to see if we can get the actual sources for this one. So no, it doesn't say. So let's go into Uno here. It's going to be easier to find. Okay, so it's supposed to be Uno UI element extensions. Find dependency property using reflection. Okay, so we're getting to that point, which means that we're probably lost before. So let's see if it's the same file. Yeah, it's the same file at 2 locations. So not particularly interesting. So okay, so we need to find Uno UI extensions. Let's try to find if we can actually search in this. Uno, what did I say? UI element extensions. UI element extensions. Oh, look at that. We can search in it. That's very cool. So that means that we don't need to go too far with that. Okay, so the one that we want is the one that's located in Uno UI extensions. So the one at the top. This one. Download source and continue debugging. So I want to go somewhere down the end. That's going to be this one. So if I do something, probably gonna have to restart then. Does it say the message again? No, because the value is different. So probably gonna have to toggle if I want to be re-executing it. Probably should have. No, let's try this one. Maybe that's gonna work as well. So I have the file opened, and so I do it once. I'm going to try to debug and see why we're getting to that point. Okay, so we're getting to that point. So that's for another reason. That's not the one that we're looking for. Okay, so let's do something. And do we get to that point? So it's not that one. And maybe it's not the right value, property value getter. No, that's not the right message. Okay, so it's that one that we're looking for. Yeah, that's not the right one. Okay, so it's that file we're looking at. So binding property helper. So I took the wrong one. Property helper. Where am I? Okay, there we go. downloading the source again. And the message is, so part of this one. So property, value property getter doesn't exist. Okay, let's stick with this one. Is there another one that looks like this? No indexer. Yeah, that one doesn't exist. May help. No, 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 and there we go. Okay, so that's good. So we have the ones that we wanted, so that's good. And not in the right file, of course. Now I know at some point there was a way to have Visual Studio being visually different, like a very different color. So now you're switching between two versions, and you have the same sources. You're putting breakpoints and not the right locations. I wonder if that will come back, or maybe there's an option that I don't know about that would help. Okay, so if I click again, it does nothing, of course. So now let's go do some hot reload. And I say if my, actually let's do my property equals null. It's gonna be easier. Do this and then do something again, and that won't work because those messages only appear once. So that won't change anything. So probably it's actually updating this, but not doing anything afterwards. Oh, that's another issue that comes from Visual Studio. So it can't stop the debugging. I'll have to terminate the app, I would guess, if the app wants to. Yeah, that worked. Okay. Nope. Nope. Not that one. Okay, let's try again. Okay, so setting the property to null is not going to change anything. And the way the binding property helper works is that there are things that are only executed once, because we don't want to spam the log every time there's something that you can't change in any way. So it happens only once. So I can remove that one. It's not particularly useful. Okay, so if I click on do something, will I hit a breakpoint? Yes, I do. Okay, so we can see here it's inside of we're calling that create memoized. So it's it only happens only once. And why do we get here? We get here because the property getter does not exist on that type. And interestingly, we have primitive value, which is supposed to be handled properly for nullable primitives. But we're not getting there. And there's a good reason for this. It's because it's a nullable, but it's not a primitive. It's a struct. It's a record struct, but maybe it's not flagged as a primitive. So let's see. There's probably some other types of things that we're doing here, and we're not supporting that one. So let's go and dig into this one. If we take type, which was there, but that's fine. Oh, method is optimized. That's not going to be useful. Ah, I see. It's because the symbols are coming from something that's optimized. So it still is something that is interesting. So if I want to debug this, I won't be able to because of the fact that the symbols for the code that I'm looking at have been built using a release configuration. So there's not enough information for the debugger to see something of interest in that context. So we're not going to be able to do much. Let's see if I do this primitive. No, it doesn't work here. An immediate window. No, it doesn't work. It doesn't want it as well. Okay, so that's not too big of a problem. So now we do know that there's something that's not supported there because of the fact that at that location, we're trying to support nullables, but for some reason we're not getting to it. So one thing that we could do is try to go for the support. So when we get to that point, that means that we have, so inside of Uno, we have something that's called, maybe outside the Lambda, I could get a, yeah, I probably could get something outside of the Lambda, but the problem is that that location is, well, actually we could try, let's try it. Let's not hit that much, but maybe. Let's see if we get something for this one. So if we're, let's go if we're here, for instance. And I don't think it's going to change much because it's not, I don't think it's a matter of context specifically. It's probably just because of the symbols at that location are not the right ones. Yeah, that's what it says. So it really is because the symbols are built for using release configuration. They're probably missing a few things. So yeah, not working. But you know, it's easy. It's if we have to get there, we can do something to work around this and build Uno and make the app use it properly. So for the sake of the exercise, actually, let's do this. Yeah, because you know, I see that there some people here that have not seen this already. So let's do this. So in Uno, what we have, so I'm debugging the Skia version. So we have something that allows to build Uno and override a specific version of a Nuget package inside of the Nuget cache. That allows to do you know, not having to create a Nuget package for everything. And you know, what it's worth, creating the Nuget packages for Uno is very difficult. Even on CI, we have to do a multi-job Nuget package creation, so it's not particularly easy. So don't try to do this on your machine. It's not going to be something that you can do at this point. So what we do is override the target framework, and then we override a specific version of the Nuget packages. So what we do is take the version of Uno that's used inside the app. So in this case, it's 41dev724, and we change that version here so that when we build Uno, it's going to override that version, and the app that uses it is going to be using the right one. So now we're using NetStandard 2. NetStandard 2 is for target here, that's WebAssembly and Skia, and we're using Skia in that case. So let's go and build for Skia. So we're using solution filters so that we don't load everything and every target that exists, because there are way too many of those. And Visual Studio, even now with the Visual Studio being 64 bits, it helps, but not enough for it not to be too slow when building everything. So to be able to do this and do the override properly, we need to compile one specific project, which is the runtime Skia here. We just do a rebuild and it will just override everything. So we can take a look at the build. We can see here that the build is happening, and there are some lines specifically that happens to be there. So like this one says overriding Nuget package cache with the version that just got built. And what that does is it allows you to just debug everything without having to fill it around with Nuget packages and things like that. So it's building the Uno Skia package, and it's going to be overriding everything else as we go. So the nice thing is that we can also override the source generators here with this, so that we don't spend too much time fiddling with other types of Nuget packages, and then when you rebuild it, it just works properly. So that's what we have here. Okay, so we're up to the last one and we're done. Okay, so now what we do is we go back here and then we rebuild. So now the interesting thing is that the external sources are actually now local sources. They're not coming from GitHub. They're coming from the build that I have locally and that I've built from my sources locally. So that means that we're going to be able to put breakpoints and see what's inside and try to debug the primitive stuff that we had here. So that one, it doesn't work anymore, of course, because it's another location. So we have to find the bindable property helper file at the right location. And I'm not sure. Oh, external sources seems to work, but yeah, it doesn't work anymore for Uno UI because the sources are now local. They're not coming from sources that are from SourceLink. So let's try to find the file in question. So it was a binding property helper. Let's open that one again. But this time it's the local one. And we can put breakpoints at the right location here. And see, so you can see that they actually do resolve. So that's the good part. And if we click, we're gonna get to where we want to, and its primitive is false. So that's our bug. So we have a struct record that's nullable, and we're interpreting it incorrectly because we're you're allowing for other things to work, and probably we tested only primitives and not anything else. I don't think anyone thought about putting a record struct as part of a dependency property. So let's go and fix this. One thing that we have to do before is, and I was alluding to this before, is that location is when we fall back to reflection-based lookups for types that are passed to the dependency, to the binding system. So one thing we can do is add the bindable property on the record and see if that changes something. So what that does, bindable, what that does is that it flags the type as being something that can be bound, and some code is going to be generated for it. So let's go take a look at that one quickly. Let's see if that worked. So bindable is not valid. Oh, that is new. Ah, okay, because it's not a class. Okay, so that explains the problem here. So we can't use it on this one because it has to be a class on that location. Hi, Atif. Thanks for joining. Hi, Jose. For MVUX, the only thing that I can show you is the documentation that we have on the Uno extensions repository and the documentation that was created for this. Let's see. I have this properly here. So if you go to Uno extensions, and you have some documentation here with MVUX. So that's going to be the way for using feeds and every other things around this. That's pretty much the only documentation that we have at this point. And then, of course, you can take a look at the sample app that's inside. So in the samples, you have two samples. You have a playground and then a commerce app that we have demoed at UnoConf. So McNates, you've lost how to filter the Uno solution. You mean to open the solution filter? The solution filter is available here. So if you click on that button, you can filter here. So I have a if you search for how to build an Uno solution on YouTube, I think. Let's see. On YouTube Uno platform, if you search for videos, and we have how to build something, I think, no. It's one of my videos that I created a while back. SQLite, Tim Scripton. It's actually a while back. So it's one there. I don't remember which one that is. It's how to debug code inside an existing application. So if you go for this one without the sound, you're gonna get the same thing as I did before. Okay, so we did the update. So if we go back to the application, we can see here that bindable is not available, so we can use that one. I was supposed to be taking a look at the file that is normally generated when you do this. In Uno generators, there's one that's called bindable type providers here, but this one is not generated anything, so you can't see the generation here. So not going to be particularly useful. Okay, so let's go and create some unit tests for this one. So I'm not going to be opening the solution again using Skia, but I'm going to be using it with net 461. And this one we use for actual unit testing. So let's go to the unit tests here. And we're going to go try to find the unit tests that are pertaining to xBind and value binding, actual value type binding for nullables. So there's probably a test that's associated to the thing that we're looking for. So if I search for bindable binding property helper, and if we search for is primitive, it's not this one. So we have, so we're talking about this one. So let's take a look at the commits that were associated to this specific line and try to find not the history, not at all what I wanted. Okay, so Visual Studio is not happy about this one. Okay. So let's blame. And let's find if there's a set of tests associated with this. There should be. If I did this properly at that time. So yes, there is. So given dependency property here, there's a test that was added likely to be able to do that kind of validation. Okay, so when nullable property binding, there you go. Okay, so that we have this test that's made for this, and we're gonna expand on this one and add an additional test that validates the support for structs, for nullable structs. Okay, so let's go for this. So we're saying nullable struct record. The record is probably not particularly interesting because it's a set of properties, but let's call it that way. And if at some point there's any specific feature that needs to happen with this one, I'm going to change it. So I have a border, I have my nullable. So it's the framework element. So I'm going to be making another one. And I'm going to be calling it, I'm just going to copy paste the code that comes from nullable struct record property owner. And I'm going to be copy pasting completely the code that XAML Llama created for this. Okay. And same thing for all this. There we go. So nullable record here. We have a record. It's not read in any way. Let's do some linting of it. Name of's good. Okay. So we can remove this. It's not particularly useful. And then let's go back here. So it's nullable record. And the property is called my property. So we're going to set it to null first. It is going to be first by default. So it's not going to be particularly interesting. So we have this one. And then we need to create an xBind on this one. So that we can't do using code like this. So we're going to have to use an actual control to do it. But actually, I wonder. So there are actually two paths here. The first one is using normal bindings, because the code that we saw before is used by normal bindings. So we're going to fix the normal bindings first, and then we're going to fix the xbind if that needs. Well, we're going to add a test for xbinds and see if that works properly. So that one is going to be in another location. So let's fix the first one. for normal bindings. So what we want is a path that looks like the one that was defined in the XAML here in that application. And we're talking about this one. So it's not a compiled source here. Oh, yeah, compiled source works here. So we're gonna use source instead for now. So it's my property value and other property, so it's gonna be the exact same. It's a binding, so we're trying to bind the border here to the other one. So in this case, actually we probably should be able to do the same thing. So we're going to be validating this one. So we're tricking the compiler to say it's an actual xBind, so it's using the same kind of features. So our assert is here, is saying that, so O2 is going to be that border for which the property tag is bound to the other property here. So it's supposed to be a string. So by default, it's going to be null, because we're not setting anything. And then if we set something afterwards, and we have to set the mode as well. So mode is two-way, or one-way at least for now. And then we're going to change the value of this one, for which we don't have access to. So let's do this. I'm going to call it property owner. So we have a property owner here, and then we're going to change that the my property to be a record that has 42 in it, because it's the right answer. So let's validate this. So now our tag is supposed to be 42, because it's supposed to be data bound properly. So because we haven't changed anything, it's supposed to be failing. So let's see if that's the case. So if preview 5 works properly, and I think they made a lot of updates since preview 1, it's supposed to be running on the first try, because in previous version it was not running at the first try. It was trying to do some weird things and not trying to get the test to run. It was actually not showing anything. It was just saying 0 tests found and then stop there. So let's see if it's better now. So the other one that we're going to be testing is going to xBind, and this one is going to be in the other location. And we have I think it's markup or data, xBind test. There you go. Okay, so we have xBind test. So what we're going to do is pretty much take that piece here, and we're going to be taking all this and duplicating it inside of the other one, xBind binding or Poco or maybe another one. So that's going to be the other one. So Jose is asking, I take a look at MVUX on GitHub, and at UnoConf was there any talk about MVUX? Yeah, I actually talked about it. If you take a look at I don't know exactly at what time, but there was a discussion. I think it's halfway through. I discussed MVUX and gave some details about what's happening. So if you have specific things that you have questions about how that works, or any specifics or anything, join us on Discord and ask some questions, or on GitHub discussions. So you can open discussions there, and members of the team are going to take a look and see if there are new things that we can improve. Okay, so it's building a few other dependencies once. Fluent themes. So in there, we're going to be doing the same thing. So creating a new control, but this time we're not going to be writing it that way. And one of the reasons we want to have a test that is written differently is because the path is going to be written as code, not as a set of string that's going to be parsed at runtime. So that's why it needs to be validated differently. This one is going to be using the same thing underneath, but it's going to be a bit different. The Discord link is actually quite easy to find. Jose, let me give you this. Actually, go to platform Uno, you have support, and in support you have GitHub and Discord. And if you click here, you're going to get a link to be invited to our Discord. Okay, so now it's built in tests. And let's see if it works, if it actually fails. So it's supposed to be failing. And we're going to see if we can adjust this part so that it behaves properly. And probably it's going to be something like isstruct or something like that, without breaking anything else. Okay, so it fails. That's good. And the test failure is that we're expecting 42 and we got null. Good. So let's try to fix the rest. So when we get here, I would say that the base would be isValueType. So let's change it for this one, and see if that changes anything. So this time I'm going to be running the whole suite of tests because I'm changing a bit the rest, so it may break the previous one. So for instance, this one that uses myNullable. So myNullable here is a nullable integer. So it's a value type. It's not a primitive, it's a value type. So it's still valid, but who knows? It may break something. So let's see if it actually does what it's supposed to be doing. So one of the things that we want to change is the compilation loop for those specific tests. It's still using the current Uno source generation host, and it's not using Roslyn as part of the current pipeline. So it makes it a bit slower to build. See, it has to go through again through the previous Uno Fluent, things like that, and it takes a bit more memory as well. You can see that the overall memory consumption is up to 10 gigs, which is quite high. So it's something that will definitely help when we change it. And because we're changing the Uno.UI DLL, then it has quite a few dependencies that are linked to it, so it has to rebuild everything up. We try to use reference assemblies. I don't know, are any of you that are listening using reference assemblies for your projects so that your build goes a bit faster? Because we've been trying to use it, and it brings all sorts of weird dependencies issues, and yeah. So I know the .NET team has been asking for it, for feedback on this one. I mean, the Uno solution is a bit complex, so maybe that's we're falling through cracks as a result. But yeah, that's correct, Darren. It's difficult. So I mean, it starts from being a kind of a good solution in a sense. You're building something, and then you take dependencies on the reference types, and the reference types don't change, then that means all your dependencies are not supposed to change. I mean, it's probably something that we could take a look at next week. Let's see, if we can adjust the build so that it actually generates reference assemblies instead of generating everything, so that it goes a bit faster. Because the point would be that if I change Uno, then I don't need to change anything else, because it's going to be rebuilding the actual implementation for that reference assembly and not the rest. So it's supposed to be that. And maybe they changed something. as part of a .NET 6 or others. Or maybe in this case, we're using .NET. We're using .NET 5. Actually .NET 4.6, so it dates quite a bit. That dates quite a bit. So I don't know if it's gonna help. But anyways, okay. So it failed. Now let's find out which one. So the new one that I added is still not working. So isPrimitive is probably not the solution. Okay, so it's not helping at all. Okay, so let's see if we have if we can go and debug this instead of and see if we're actually going through that part. So this time it should be building a bit faster. So for some reason it's building for the second build. If you don't change anything, it's rebuilding again, but then the third time it doesn't build. So that's a bit better. Yeah. It hurts. Okay, still building. Okay, so we're gonna see if we can change that afterwards. Okay, so we can see here that's generating code. Good. Okay. Let's go and take a look at that location and see if we're getting to the right thing. So is type a value type? It's not a value type. Okay. So oh, that's because it's a border. Okay, so that's fine. So because we're looking at other types of bindings. Oh, so we didn't go through that part. So that's interesting. So that would mean that it didn't get updated for some reason. So my property, my value is there. Okay, so we have another problem here. Okay, we're going to be using source binding instead and see if we have another type of issues here. So yeah, it's still taking a while. So that's definitely just something that would improve the loop, instead of waiting for the compiler to finish. But that's curious because we're not getting to the point where we evaluate that the property is supposed to be of the right type. So it could be that SUT. Oh, that's right. I know. I forgot about that one. Okay, so that's not about binding. It's because the path is not the right one. So it has to be tag dot, because we're binding to SUT, and SUT is a border, and we're binding on the tag property of the SUT. So that's why it's not doing the right thing. Okay, so let's try again. So still doing some source generation host. So this one is doing mostly XAML generation, and it takes a while because there are quite a few XAML files in the unit tests. So it's something that we should probably be doing differently, and especially with regards to the newer updates that are coming from .NET 6, where there's support for incremental builds and reuse of the outputs, and we should be able to cache some of the content that we're parsing every time. At least particularly when it's inside of Uno. Okay, so is value type here. Okay, so we're in the record, so that's good. And I'm probably going to be green as a result. Let's take a look. It is green. Good. Okay, so we're good. So the issue was not the fix, it was the test. Okay, so What that means is that the original change that was there was about value types and not what was about primitives. It was too restrictive. It was not testing structs. And now using value type instead of primitive allows for being broader in terms of what we accept as values for binding. Okay, so let's see if there are is primitive uses somewhere else. Okay, so there's this one. And this one is in a method that's called internal get property type. And this one, I'm not sure where that comes from. So let's go take a look if there's a test for this one so that we can duplicate it and see where that comes from. That's actually more recent. And is there a test for this one? So yes, there is, but it's for xBind specifically. So we're going to be able to duplicate that one. So we're going to take a look at those tests as well. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so that's for nullable checkbox. Okay, interesting. Okay, so we may be able to change that one as well. So we're going to have to add a test for this one, for that change as well. So it's not supposed to be primitive in most cases. It's supposed to be is value type. So we're going to change this one. So is there another? Okay, so those were the only two locations. So now we're going to be adding another test. But this one is for the actual xBind that's in the source. So because of an issue inside of Visual Studio, and I don't want to spend, I don't want you to spend some time waiting on Visual Studio to show something up. We're going to take this file and duplicate it and say xbind record struct. Record struct, and it's going to be nullable record struct. Okay, and do the same thing for the other one below. XAML file. And interesting thing is that if you add files manually here, from the Windows Explorer, they appear very quickly in that list. But if you add them using the file add new file type or file something, it takes, let's say, 20 seconds to finish. So just so you know. Okay, so the file is this one. I'm going to be renaming a few things here. Let's call that user control. And we're going to be adding the same thing that we did on the other side. So let's change this one as well. Let's xbind user control. And we're going to be doing the same thing that we did on the other side. So the given property binding was on the nullable record struct. So we're going to take the same thing that we have here, put it in this control. And we're going to have to take the nullable string that we had here. But this time we don't need tag because we're directly in a XAML file, an actual XAML file. Copy paste didn't work. Okay. So xbind IntelliSense is not happy because it doesn't understand in that context. We're in a context that Visual Studio doesn't know about, so it's not happy, but that's fine. And then let's go make a test about this one. So I don't know if we have primitives here. When primitive data template, no, that's the only one that we have here. We don't have anything specific here, so let's create a new one. Okay, so we have a new binding here. So what we can do is create the test with the same name. So when xBind, let Nullable Records struct, and the name here is xBind Nullable Records struct. We force load it because we're in a test. And then what we're going to do is validate that the property that we created, so text block, so tb1.text is what we expect it to be. So tb1.text. So in this case, it's supposed to be null when we start. Actually, it's a text block, so it may not be null. So it may be null, an empty string. So we'll see. We'll see. It may be different. So now that we have this, we can change the my property with a new record. So on the SUT here, I'm going to set my property to something that has 42. And now it's supposed to be the same thing, which is being equal, of course. Are equal. Okay. So with this, we should be having the same results. So let's try it. So we can also go take a look at the code that is generated for this. And to be doing this, we can go into the ops folder and take a look at the file that we created. So it's xbind nullable record struct. So let's see, we have it here. So we can't see here because it's not being updated yet. We don't have it here. So we have to wait a little bit for it to update properly. We changed Uno UI, so that's why it's rebuilding the rest. So it takes a while because it rebuilds the whole thing before. So we have to wait for Uno UI to be built. But in most cases, when we take a look at the generation, let's look at xbind user control here. We can see some of the generation and specifically one of the bindings that's here. So this one is a text binding, and we can see, so let's actually wrap the content so we can see the actual invocation. So we set a binding, we set it to 1 time, and then we have a method that's called apply binding. We set the binding mode, then we set the provider, so how to build that property. Then we give a lambda that actually does the binding. So this one is a bit long. So we have a ternary here, and that one does the binding of my user control here. So it's xbind user control my property to the property that's called tb1.text. So we're binding to the text property. So it's not particularly readable, and it's not exactly meant to be. It's supposed to be efficient in terms of the way we execute it at runtime. But still, it's interesting sometimes to go and take a look at what that does and how it's built. So you can actually put breakpoints there if you want to, and see when it's actually being invoked and things like that. It's likely that we're going to make changes to that part because there are some issues in the way we're interpreting this, mostly because of the reason that if there are nulls in a chain like this, it does not behave the way it should. Mainly because it's supposed to be returning unset values in some cases, and it's not. So that's the kind of thing that we should be doing, and we're not. But Yeah, so that's one of the things that we'll be changing at some point. Okay, so TB1 is not available because it's not on the right type, of course. So it's SUT. And we can actually go take a look at the code that was generated there. So this one's going to be removed anyways. So let's restart that again. We should be seeing the code for the new control that we had. Do we see it here? What was the name already? So it's supposed to be xBind Nullable Records struct, but I don't see it here. So maybe... Ah, there it is. Okay, so what's inside that file? So same thing, we binding to TB1, text property, the mode, which is one way. And then, whoop, too far. One way, and then we have a binding apply. We set the binding provider, then the delegate, and then we can see here that we have a context, and then there we have it. We have the context being my nullable record struct, then my property dot value dot other property. And that one is actually a problem because if my property is null, then it's going to raise a null reference, or in this case, it's a null reference. So, and it's not supposed to be that way, and where the execution of that specific lambda is not correct. So in some cases, it could be rewritten that way, but it's not supposed to return null. It's supposed to do nothing. And that's one of the things that is not correct at this point, and that we're going to have to change. So what we're doing internally is that we're try catching around this. And if we detect a null reference, we're handling it in some way for now. It's a performance concern, but we're going to change it at some point so that it behaves better. Okay, so the test has failed, and is not null because it's not null. For a text, it's supposed to be empty string. So that's what I was expecting before. So let's run it again. And after this one, I think we should be good for making a APR if it turns green. So let's see. So the code that's been generated properly. So that's a good thing. Because in some cases, when you're trying to write something, and there's another issue that was opened a few days ago that's related to the use of implicit casts in between types, and that doesn't work properly because of parentheses that are not at the right place. So, oh, there you go, it's green. So that's good. That means that we have proper support for it. And all the tests passed. What do you know? I think the llama's going to be happy. Okay. So that was an intense one. I hope you liked it, because it goes deep into the binding engine. And go take a look at all the details that we have for bindings and xBind. I hope it's going to have helped you dig into what we're doing with Uno, and allow you to do a bit more contributions if you want to. If you're using Uno and you find something that doesn't work, let's help each other with getting Uno to do a lot more. So that's it. So thanks very much for joining, and I hope I can see you next week. Until then, happy coding. Bye for now.